Hey ladies, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Trisha Stefankowitz, registered dietitian, nutritionist, and today on our Health Tip Tuesday, we are going to talk about knowing your health numbers. For a lot of us, I think it's very easy to kind of get on the scale and to have that number be the one that we focus on. But there are other numbers when it comes to your health that are much more important because they are the ones that we don't see on an everyday basis, and they kind of tell us what's happening inside our body of things that we don't see every day. They're kind of like the invisible numbers, but the ever so important numbers. So I want to talk about our health numbers today. Before we start the episode, I want to remind you that I have a free Facebook community for women like you who are on this health journey and you are looking for some more motivation, or perhaps you are able to support other women who are on this journey. Hop on over to Whole Health Empowerment Project on Facebook. It's completely free. It is a new group. So I am, if you guys want to be one of the OG members, then hop on over. I'd love to see you there. Okay, now on to the episode. So most people know what their numbers are when it comes to weight, and your weight, you probably know it. Even if you haven't been on a scale in a while, I'm sure you probably have this number in the back of your head that is what your weight is. Like you kind of have a general ballpark idea of what your weight range is. But much less people know what their health numbers are. And they, I believe, are even more important than just the numbers on the scale. The thing with the scale, and we've talked about the scale multiple times on this episode, on this podcast, is that, you can be doing these physical things, but it doesn't really tell you what your disease risk is. It's going to not be the number that is going to have the biggest impact, but it's going to be really what behaviors you're doing. So if you have a high number on the scale, but say you're practicing behaviors where you're eating a lot of healthy fruits and vegetables and you're exercising regularly, then perhaps your disease risk is less. So let's start talking about things and numbers that we need to know, all of us need to know, because they are important, as they are the things that are really able to help assess what your health is and your risk of different diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. So let's talk about these numbers. The first number is your blood pressure. So I don't know if you are somebody who has high blood pressure or has a family history of high blood pressure. So what is blood pressure? Well, a lot of times you'll hear people say that blood pressure is this like silent killer, because blood pressure is something that you can't tell how your health is just on your weight alone. So just by looking at yourself, you wouldn't be able to know that you have high blood pressure or not. Typically, blood pressure is measured in the doctor's office, right? And again, if you have high blood pressure, you may not have any warning signs or symptoms, so you may not even know that you have it. But typically, blood pressure has a top number and a bottom number. So the top number is called your systolic number, and typically you want that number to be less than 120. The bottom number is called your diastolic blood pressure, and that, generally, I think the average range is I think physicians like it to be less than 80. So you have the systole over diastolic blood pressure, and the goal is to have about 120 over 80. So the top number kind of tells you what's happening, the force of blood against the walls of your arteries. And then the bottom number is what's kind of happening when your heart is at rest. So measuring your blood pressure is the only way to know if you have high blood pressure and really high numbers. Again, the goal is 120 over 80. So really high numbers indicate that your heart may be working too hard. But unless you have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, it might be very hard for you to know that unless you go to the doctor's office. So what I would say is for blood pressure, that should be something that you typically get measured or get read at least once a year when you are at your doctor's appointment, and just to kind of see where you're at when it comes to your blood pressure. So the first number was blood pressure. The second number we'll talk about is your cholesterol. And when we talk about cholesterol, we are also in this category going to be talking about triglycerides. So a cholesterol, why the numbers are important is because just by looking at you, it's hard to know what's happening inside of your body, right? And so some of these numbers, especially cholesterol, is something that really helps let us know what your risk is of developing fatty deposits or plaques in your arteries of your heart. And it really lets us know if your blood flow is really good or if you have a little bit of narrowing so that your blood flow might be a little bit hindered, or perhaps you even have some blocked arteries. So that's why a cholesterol test is important. When your cholesterol is high, that means that you're at a pretty significant risk of developing heart disease, and so, or more importantly, coronary artery disease. So typical cholesterol is made up of your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol, and then your HDL cholesterol, which is your good cholesterol. So the two of these, your LDL and your HDL, form your total cholesterol. Total cholesterol numbers goal is to be less than 200. So typically that, in addition to having the overall number be less than 200, the LDL goal, the bad cholesterol, is to be less than 100. And the HDL goal, the good cholesterol, we want that typically to be 50 or higher for women. And for men, it's different. It's 40 or higher. Okay, so you have your total cholesterol. The goal is to be less than 200, but it does matter in terms of your LDL and your HDL. So you'll see that typically all together. The other important part of or component of the cholesterol is also your triglyceride level. And triglyceride levels are basically, they let the doctors know your risk of heart disease and your risk of stroke. So if you're seeing any kind of health professional and they're looking at that, that's why they're doing it. They're trying to figure out your heart disease risk and your stroke risk. What they typically want you to be at, your doctors, are that you have a triglyceride level that's 150 or less. Now, typically, these cholesterol and triglyceride numbers, it really just depends how often you get them. I know my insurance company only covers every 5 years, so you may not be able to get it as often. So these labs may be dictated by your insurance, and they also are probably going to be dictated by previous numbers and any family history that you have of heart disease. I think most people have some kind of risk of heart disease, so I don't know how much that plays into it. When you get this blood work done, especially your cholesterol and triglycerides, typically you need to fast for up to 8 hours beforehand. And what you're looking for, or what your doctor is measuring, is called either a lipid panel or a lipid profile. And that, again, includes your cholesterol numbers, your LDL, your HDL, and then also your triglyceride levels. And then lastly, it would be your fasting glucose. So your fasting glucose is a measure of trying to figure out what your diabetes risk is. My assumption is that probably most people are going to have this level taken and kind of be a little bit more familiar with their numbers here than they would be with your cholesterol numbers. But again, it probably varies according to your past medical history. A lot of times when you go to the doctor's office, they'll do like a basic chem panel, and you may have a glucose in that. But so that will let you know a little bit of where your glucose is. And typically you want your fasting glucose to be less than 100. And again, the fasting glucose tells us really how your body is utilizing the sugar from the foods that you're consuming every day, how well your body's utilizing that, and then if you have a risk for diabetes. So what will also then happen if your fasting glucose comes back higher than 100, remember 100 or less is the goal, then your physician may also order a hemoglobin A1C. And so that's a little bit more extensive. That is like more a measure of where your blood sugar is shaking out over a 3-month period, whereas your fasting glucose is just like you're getting a blood draw. It's for that moment. So the hemoglobin A1C goes a little bit more in depth in terms of what your blood sugar looks like, and it will really give you an idea of where your blood sugar has been, where your sugar has been shaking out for a 3-month time period. And so based on any of the results that you get, whether it's your blood pressure or whether it's your cholesterol or whether it's your fasting glucose, you may need to modify your lifestyle depending on what that is. We'll do some episodes in the upcoming weeks about just about like going further into depth about these topics, but I just wanted you to be aware of what your numbers are. And if you haven't been back to the doctors, because I know with COVID, it's been really hard. I know a lot of people haven't been able to get to their doctors, or it really just hasn't been a priority. So if you're in a place that maybe you have less restrictions, I would say make an appointment with your doctor if you haven't in the last, over the last year, and get your blood pressure checked, especially if you're at high risk for blood pressure, get your fasting glucose checked. And then also, if you haven't in the last 5 years, also get your cholesterol and your triglycerides checked as well. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us today on our Health Tip Tuesday. And I hope that you were able to find some more information about your numbers. And I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to just look at what your numbers are, just so that you have an idea of what your baseline is. I'll see you back here on Thursday. Have a great week.